Working? Yeah. Today is going to be, for lack of a better explanation, it's going to be like an Irish wake. This is going to be story time. And it's hot standing under the sun, so it's also going to be brief. Today's a day for stories. So let's start with how we got here. My wife, who's out there somewhere, Jancy Chandler, I could have you speak. Is this any better? Okay. My wife was community development director under Pat. And politely, I will say they didn't see eye to eye. Another way to put it was they couldn't stand each other. They had some sort of a conference that they had to go to in Washington, and they asked me to go. I think they asked me to go because they figured they were going to need a referee. So I went. Pat and I went for a walk around Washington one of those days. And got to understand, Pat and I never had a serious conversation in our lives. We've known each other since high school. He was Lynn English, I was St. Mary's. We would argue about anything and everything. It was our favorite form of communication. Something hit us that day. We're standing in front of the Lincoln Monument, and I said to him, now this is either in his first or second term. I said to him, what do you want your legacy to be? Before the question mark came out of my mouth, he was answering the question. He said, I want the library named after me. Now, the answer came too fast for it to be spur of the moment. Now, I've told this story to several people over the years, and Steve Smith had a better version of this. Pat wasn't even in office yet. He called Steve one day, said, meet me in my office. Steve said, great, where's your office? Pat said, the mayor's office. Steve said, well, how did you even get in there? And he said, don't worry about it, I get in there. Meet me in my office tomorrow. They started talking about the ridiculous idea du jour by Pat. And at the end of the conversation, Steve asked a similar question. What do you want for your legacy? I want the library named after me. So I guess this was a man with a plan. Now, this didn't happen just because Steve and I and Buzzy Barton wanted it to happen, and it didn't happen just because we have a mayor who understands the importance of this building. It happened because of who and what Pat was. He was the longest consecutive serving mayor in Lynn history, 1992 to 2002. He never lost a mayoral election. He directed $10.7 million into this building. Education was paramount in his life. Graduate of Lynn English, Bowdoin, MBA from Suffolk, and a law degree from BC. He had more degrees than he had common sense, but that's okay. That's why we loved him. He grew up with education playing an important part in his life because both his mother and father were educators. At the time of his death, he was on a path to become president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And this note is strictly for Steve Smith and me because we spent years in the Aganis Foundation. Pat is the only person to ever earn an Aganis scholarship, play in the Aganis All-Star football game, and become a trustee of the foundation. The reason I bring that up is because that's a reflection on how important education was to him. Not bad, huh? Well, I want to introduce somebody who understands the importance of education, the importance of commitment to the city, the importance of this building. And this guy came to know Pat without ever having met him. So just what he has heard about him, he understood enough to make this happen. And we had a cast of thousands. I'll make this very clear. Without Mayor Nicholson, this would not have happened, plain and simple. With that, I'd like to introduce the 59th Mayor of Lynn, Jared Nicholson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. I would like to recognize some of my colleagues who have joined us. Council at Large Brian LaPierre. Ward 4 City Councilor Natasha Meji-Madri. Ward 6 City Councilor Fred Hogan. Ward 2 Councilor Obed Matul. School Committee Member Lenny Pena. School Committee Member Lorraine Gately. School Committee Member Sean Reed. We're also honored to have both the Chief of Police, Chris Reddy, and the Fire Chief, Dan Sullivan. I want to pass along that my immediate predecessor, Mayor McGee, is out of town, but wanted to send his warm congratulations on this really terrific honor. I'd also like to thank the recognition committee that was formed to help us make recommendations on these types of events. The Library Board of Trustees, several of whom are here today to help us mark this occasion, and others who send their regrets. I would also like to recognize Representative Dan Cahill. As well as so many of you who are here to help mark this really noteworthy occasion. Mayor McManus clearly touched so many throughout his career, and it is truly heartwarming to see how many of those folks are here in that capacity, as well as a tremendous honor to be able to share this special moment with so many members of his family. I'd like to thank everyone involved with today's event, the folks from the library, from my team, Inspectional Services Department, Department of Public Works, the ROCA work crew, everybody that helped get this beautiful space ready for the program, as well as the other speakers who we'll hear from later to talk about Mayor McManus. Thank you all for your help. Mayor McManus is so well deserving of this honor, and I want to drive home again how happy and proud I feel to be able to share this moment with his family, and particularly Deb McManus, who continues to be such a great leader in this city. So thank you, Deb. Mayor McManus clearly loved the library and was passionate about education. And we hope to continue to grow and cultivate that love of learning in everyone who walks through these doors and will be walking by this plaque. As Ted mentioned, I did not have the privilege of knowing Mayor McManus personally, but his reputation and record continues to have significant impact on our city. At our high schools, including his vaunted Lynn English Bulldogs, in our water and sewer infrastructure, even the reputation that I've encountered to this day that he built and cultivated among mayors nationally through the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I also want to take a moment to reflect on his good friend and one of the driving forces behind everything that we're doing here today. The late Councilor Buzzy Barton was he was so passionate about making this day come to fruition because of the esteem in which he held Mayor McManus. And I'd like to just pause a moment in his memory. Buzzy spoke so movingly about all that Mayor McManus did for the city, particularly for communities of color. And oftentimes, and especially right now, I wish that Buzzy could be here to see that this has happened. And I wish that I could have had the opportunity to meet Mayor McManus, to ask him what he thinks today about the issues that we face, the changing educational landscape about which I know he was so passionate, the ways in which our library continue to evolve and meet the needs of our citizens for knowledge and for advancement. But short of that opportunity, acknowledging the limits of mortality, we have ways to memorialize. And dedicating a building is one of our most significant. It's truly a humbling privilege to participate in this honor of Mayor Patrick J. McManus, the 55th mayor of the city of Lynn, today at one of the most beautiful and consequential buildings that we have here in the city, in the Lynn Public Library. Congratulations, Mayor McManus. Thank you.
How about another story? Many of the people here today attended Pat's wake and or funeral. Do you remember the enormity of it? I had only seen one that rivaled it, and that was across the street for Bill Cannell of Swampscott. And the day of Mr. Cannell's funeral, Father Donald Monin, the then president of Boston College, gave the eulogy. And he had one line that hit me that day, and it stays with me. And it is very apropos for today. Father Monin's line was, "Everybody in this church has a story about Bill." Today's line is, "Everybody out there has a story about Pat." One of the most enjoyable parts of going through this process was conversations I had with Steve Smith and Charlie Gator and Muna Mullins. And one of the things that we always hit on was Pat's favorite form of communication was argument. And damn, he was good. And we were laughing about Charlie would get a call 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, and Pat would want to talk, and the conversation would begin with, "Oh, Charlie," and Charlie would get so bored with the conversation, he'd hand the phone to one of his sons and say, "Will you listen to him? And just signal when you want me to come back." Steve Smith. Conversation with Steve began, "Steve-o," and you just cringe. Well, for me it was, "Oh, Teddy." And one of my favorite Pat stories is Tommy Cole's out there somewhere. Tom may have been on this trip, but Pat and I had several meetings with the mayor of Stamford, Connecticut, who later became the governor of Connecticut, Dan Malloy. And one of these trips, Pat and I got into such an argument that Dan asked us to leave his office and go to the parking lot. The argument was about the plural of the word stadium. Classic us. Who cares except us? I said stadia, which is correct. Pat said stadiums, but he had to add the little dig to say, and that's why you'll never get elected to anything, because you're a snob. Guilty. We did leave the office, by the way, and everything was just fine. Might have been the same trip. On the way home from Connecticut, Pat was talking so much that I was just getting antsier and antsier. And speeding in Connecticut is not the smartest thing you can do. Right before the Massachusetts border, we were pulled over. Connecticut Statey came over, license and registration, and he said to me, "Do you know how fast you were going?" Well, I knew, but I also knew this is not a good time to be jovial. So I said nothing. From the back seat came, I know how fast he was going. He was going 106. And the cop said, "Is he your friend?" I said, "Yes, he is, a good friend." And he said, "Then you don't need my ticket. Take off." That was Pat. The best stories, as I said, were Charlie, Tommy, but the most telling story came from Tom Costin's son, Tom, who went to school at Bowdoin. When Tom was a senior, Pat was a freshman. And Tom had just incredible Pat stories, but unfortunately for you, he made me promise that I would not tell any of them. Just trust me, they were priceless and they were Pat. I'd like to bring up somebody now who can add to the Pat legend, Harry McCabe, who worked for Pat and lived to tell about it.
Thanks, Ted. First, on behalf of the Library Board of Trustees and staff, hate microphones, and staff, Andrea Williams, our chair, sends her greetings. Closer. She was looking forward to being here for this time created.
Can you hear him? No.
Is it off?
Right up to it.
Okay. Let's start again. On behalf of the Library Board of Trustees and the staff, we welcome you. Andrea Williams, our chair, sends her greetings. She was looking forward to being here, but a time change created conflict with previous commitments. Andrea sends her best wishes to the Dedication Committee, the mayor, and their work and interest for the library. I had some side notes to give, but Bob told me not to. So, and seeing it's so hot here, I'll stay with my written. Good morning, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to say a few words. I first met Pat at the Chamber of Commerce before his political life. He was interesting from the first meeting, and later, while working for him, I saw his energy and commitment to improving quality of life for everyone was contagious. As mayor, he had so many accomplishments. His knowledge of budgets, water and sewer expansion, and housing were evident in his big dreams for the city of Lynn. He worked with so many, and many could sit for hours and talk about these interactions. My thoughts go to three memories, and I believe they are part of why we are here this morning. My memories are embedded through his involvement with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Pat was new to the conference, but I never saw anyone grow and become so respected within the conference in such a short time. Usually, committee members are mayors from big cities. Pat became a big mayor. I had the pleasure of going to many conferences with him. I was even put on committees, but really it was just to get Pat there. The first point was Pat's interest and commitment to education and the workforce. I was asked if Pat would testify at Congress for the Education Committee? Of course he said yes, and I had to put some points together for him. The challenge wasn't for him knowing the facts on the subject, because it was within him. On a side note, though, I have to give this one. On our flight to Washington, Pat had the stewardess change my seat because I was bothering him, trying to go over his testimony. That night he was ready. I got called up to his room while he was having his cigar. He read the testimony once, just once, and the next day presented it word for word. Pat cared for people and understood their needs. Second point is the crime bill of 1994. At the Conference of Mayors meeting in D.C., there was full support for the bill. A special meeting was called to be in Chicago for the conference to work out final approval for a vote. We got to Chicago, and all of a sudden, it fell apart. Hours went by, and it looked like we were going to leave without a vote and the needed support from the conference. In the last 15 minutes, Pat stood up, spoke about the police and the support they needed in all our cities. To be honest, I was nervous because I wasn't sure where he was going. You never did. In 15 minutes, he accomplished what hadn't been done in hours. I mention these 2 points because it shows who I knew Pat to be. Pat not only thought it, he lived it. He loved to talk to people. When we were at conferences, Pat didn't care about the planned receptions. He always wanted to go out into the community, wherever we were, just like Ted said, and to meet with the people and see what was going on. I missed a lot of good meals. In D.C., the one particular walk while visiting the monuments, he stopped to talk to a person sitting on a bench. After a couple of minutes, Pat sat down. That was the end. And the fact was the person was homeless. Pat wanted to know how, why, and what the gentleman thought government could do to help. When we finally walked away, the gentleman yelled to Pat, "Say hi to the president." By the way, Pat talked so long, it was dark and we ended up lost. So you can imagine the argument and who knew the way back. I'll let you figure out who got us there. I know I have repeated these stories and sorry for those who have heard them before, but this is the reason I believe Pat would be so proud of this dedication. This is the Lynn Public Library. It is filled with history, knowledge, and a place where everyone and anyone is welcome. The beginning was from individuals and families who gave land and created trusts to support the library to this day. Pat loved books, history, education. On school vacations, he would pile his kids into the car and off they went to the next history lesson. I remember one of the vacations was to see and learn about Gettysburg. Pat always wanted the city to be open and available. Sorry about that. And available to everybody, and the library is just a safe place to learn and share. I know this because I had the opportunity to learn from Pat. At a conference in Tennessee, late at night, Pat called me up to his room for our annual cigar talk. I don't smoke, and he smokes cheap cigars. He asked what I thought of programs discussed at the conference, and what did I think, and why can't we take it back to Lynn? That's all he ever asked. Why can't we take it back to Lynn? I must say sometimes the late conversations were rough, but Pat never stopped thinking of Lynn and the people. At the meeting in Chicago, Pat talked with the cab driver taking us to the conference. Pat wanted to know about the crime in the city, in Chicago. The driver lost time and money on the conversation, because you know Pat's conversations, but he appreciated the opportunity to talk through his thoughts with someone who was listening. Maybe that conversation was the instrument that gave Pat the convincing argument that turned the conference conversation around. These memories I have tell me that dedicating this building would make Pat proud. I know that he would not anyone to think that the library is changing one iota. This is the Lynn Public Library. I share he now has a place at the front door welcoming young and old from every corner of the city who's entering the building, that the Lynn Public Library is for everyone, a building filled with history, hope, and opportunity. And just maybe, A young person coming through the front door and growing from his or her experience at the Lynn Library may want to be the mayor of this great city someday. Thank you.
I wasn't going to tell this story, but Harry just about begged me to do it. His point about Pat would talk to anybody. Pat and I went to New York one weekend, and he said, I got to go outside, and he went out to smoke one of those cheap cigars that Harry was talking about. But I noticed he was gone for an unusually long time. So I went out to look for him. I found our boy standing on the corner of First Avenue and 72nd Street talking to strangers. That's really not a Manhattan thing, but that was our boy. There's a lot of thanks that are necessary for today. The committee, Claire, Mike Cole, Tom Cole, Charlie Gator, Marianne Rooney Hegan, Attorney Dave Lesperance, Victor Lesperance, Jimmy Mazarius, Jimmy McDonald, Mona Mullins, Attorney Jim Smith, Attorney Steve Smith. We only accept lawyer Smiths. John Tebow, who deserves a special recognition. He is the mayor's chief of staff, and he did the heavy lifting for this, up to and including this podium. Dave Travers acted as our treasurer, and Sam Vitale was, I think, the backbone of this committee. Special thanks go to Eastern Bank and its CEO, Bob Rivers, the Costin family, Salvi Migliaccio, Arthur Papathanasi, John Gilberg, Ken Carpy, and Kevin Gainey. It wouldn't have happened without them. I have a personal special thanks, however, to go to Harry McCabe, because I had to call Harry for something yesterday. I don't remember what it was, something insignificant. And as I was talking to Harry, I happened to glance at the thing that we'll unveil in a minute, and it's a replica of the plaque, the bronze plaque that will go on the front of this building. And I was just glancing at it, half paying attention to what we were talking about, half paying attention to the poster, when I noticed the poster had a mistake. That mistake would have been mine, entirely mine. I had the wrong years of his service. I think I had 92 to 2001. I forgot those couple of spillover days going into the new year. So Harry, wherever you are, I owe you 13 grand, because that's what that bronze plaque would have cost. The guy who knew Pat best, let me introduce his brother, Judge Gary McManus. In the meantime, I'd like you to recognize Pat's wife, Deb, and the kids, Laura, Ia, Susanna, John, and Marnie.
Thank you, Ted. Can you hear me? Ted and Smitty asked me to say a few words. I'm not sure they knew Pat as well as they claim. Asking any McManus to say a few words is looking for trouble. But I do, on behalf of the family, I would like to thank the committee for all its hard work and the dedication of this building to Pat. I learned long ago not to single out individuals. I actually learned that from Pat, because you invariably forget somebody. And so rather than single out any individual, I'm just going to thank everybody here for coming, and of course the committee for their hard work. Pat's request to have the library named after him does reflect his great love of learning, and his love of knowledge. Sometimes the two didn't go together because Pat knew pretty much everything, so he didn't have to learn a whole lot. But the naming the library after him is very appropriate. He loved this building. As a matter of fact, we all love this building. Our whole family spent days combing through the stacks looking for books that we hadn't read before. It was an outing. And this is, in my estimate and in Pat's estimate, the most beautiful public building that we have here in the city of Lynn. So on behalf of the family, I thank you all, and the family appreciates this great honor for granting Pat's desired legacy. Thank you.
Okay, two final notes. We will be back soon. The plaque will be done in a few months. The purpose for today was to recognize the dedication of the building on Pat's 70th birthday today. We will use the resources that we collected today towards a commitment we made to the library. The committee committed to the library that we would raise a substantial amount of money. It's a six-figure goal that we have, and it's going towards what everybody here wants this building to be. We can't name it after a good friend of ours and perhaps the most popular politician in Lynn history. I mean, he never lost a race, a mayoral race. We can't have a ratty-looking building carry his name. The building is old. The building needs paint and some patches and all sorts of stuff. When we have completed that, we're going to have a gala, and we'll actually let you in the building then. And the gala is meant to remind people of the grandeur of this building. When Steve Smith and I went in to meet with the trustees 5 years ago to talk about this, we were amazed at how nasty the place was. And it's through nobody's fault. You know, it's old, just like me. So what we're hoping is that we'll be able to raise the money and bring it back to its grandiose state. And in closing, a lot of people have said to me how Pat would have been so proud of today. I got news for you. What Pat would have said was, "What took you so long?" Thanks. Goodbye. Can we have Debbie and the kids come up with the mayor? And I'm saying kids again because I'm old. They're hardly kids.